Okay, today we're just going to talk about getting a WinCC Runtime Advance from a computer to talk to an S7-1500. I am going to be using a 1516F, which is for safety, and it has several different ways that I can connect to it. So I just want to show, I am going to be going to the leftmost port, which is the X2 port. The X1 is for Profinet, and it has a built-in switch. So I don't know if you can see that, but the X1 has two actual Ethernet plugs that you can plug into. It's a built-in switch, whereas the X2 just has the one. And so I'm going to use the X2 to go to my computer. So that's the basic setup. So I just have an Ethernet cable coming out the back of my computer, going to the PLC. So on one. So if I come and I look at the beginning of my project, you will see in my devices and network, my network view, that I have an Ethernet connection. So you'll see that I have both of the Ethernet ports configured. They need to be on separate subnets. So in my case, I've selected 10.10.10.2 for the first and 55.55.55.2 for the rightmost port. So they just need to be on separate subnets. The IP addresses themselves don't really matter as long as they are unique, but need to be on separate subnets. I stuck in a PC station into my project. So inside there, you'll notice that the Ethernet card is set for 10.10.10.1. So if I double click on the field PG, I apologize for the resolution, but for you to be able to see things, I have to have a weird screen resolution. So in here, I stuck in an IE General, and that put it into a port, and then I picked a WinCC Runtime Advanced, and just double click on that. Few key things that you want to pay attention to with your PC station under your properties. I'm saying that my field PG is the same as the PC that it's going to be on, because it is. So the name of my computer is field PG. If you were developing on one and sending it to somewhere else, then you could turn this off and change them. So the other thing that you want to look for is, unless you're doing something with the semantic net like OPC, we don't want to have anything selected down here. So if you do this, you're going to see that it's going to try and use a soft bus to talk to something, and you're going to have some issues. So stay away from there in general. Again, if we look over here at my Ethernet address, I stuck it on 10.10.10.1. So that's going to be the IP address that I'm going to want to give the Runtime Advanced computer. Okay. If I go back to my network view and I look at my PLC, there's only a few things I set up in the PLC. So I turned on, under the system and clock memory, I turned on the clock system memory byte. That gives me my first scan bit, my always true, my always false. So useful. And then this clock memory. So MB0 is going to have a clock byte, and all of the bits within that byte flash at different frequencies. So also useful if you need to make something flash in the field. So the other things that I set up are under protection. So I am using a safety PLC. So I need to assign a password. But for this point, I want to make sure that I have full access, no protection. I highly recommend using a password, but I want to make sure that your communication at this point, we're not worried about you not typing in the right password on the HMI side. So no protection. And then we're going to scroll down. And under connection mechanism, I want you to allow the put get remote partner PLC HMI OPC. It's kind of like opening the firewall for the PLC. So not something that you may want to keep open, but for testing purposes and until we get the communication, I would say keep it off. So at this point, if I come back to my network view, you would see that we have a network connection between the PC station and the PLC, but we actually have to do one more thing. We need to do an HMI connection. So if you come up here to the top, select connection, and then just grab from WinCC Runtime Advanced and drop it onto the PLC. Then if we come over to this little window, go to the Connections tab, you will see that it has made a connection for me. There's several different ways of making this connection. If I delete this connection, I can also just open a screen. Oops, let's get rid of these. And I can come over to my PLC tags, and go to my default tag table. Default tag table. And again, I apologize for the poor resolution, but I'm going to be looking for my clock byte. If I drag that onto my screen, and then I go back to my devices and networks, that connection has also been made. So many different ways to make that connection. If you go through the wizard, it'll also make that connection for you. So you just want to make sure that the connection's there, and if you're only talking to one PLC and one WinCC Runtime Advanced, that there's only one connection in your project. So once I have that connection, I can come down to my PC station, expand down the runtime, and I just want to take a look at my connection. So in here, you're going to see access point is S7 online. I'm going to show you where we care about this, but I want yours to say S7 online. If it has S7 online 1 or S7 online 2 or something like that, just delete that. It may just have been that you copy and pasted it from somewhere or somehow it got in. And then if we were going to be using a password to talk to our PLC right now, we would put in the password here. But again, for this purposes, we're just going to keep it simple. So at this point, I want to come and look at my Ethernet setup for my computer. So I am doing my project, my development, on the same computer that I'm going to be using. So in real life, you probably would have two separate, a development computer and then your actual computer that you're deploying. But in this case, I'm doing it all on one. I will show you kind of what you need to do when you move it to a different computer, but we just want to go and make sure that our IP address is set for what we have in TIA portal. So I had the PC station IP address set for 10.10.10.1. The PLC is at 10.10.10.2. So need to be on the same subnet. The next area I want to go to is my control panel. And I'm just going to say look at all control panel items. First thing I want to look at is just to make sure that my Windows firewall is turned off. So in this case, this is just for setup, just for testing, making sure that we're not having firewall issues when we're looking to get our communication going. We can turn it back on and allow access through at that point, but for this purpose, at this point, we just want to make sure that it's turned on. Go back to your control panel, and we want to look at one more location. And this is the one that typically is not set up properly. So you want to look for your set PG PC interface, so programmer PC interface. So even if you've been downloading to the PLC, this may be set to some outer space. It may be set for some hard code, other card, or it may be set for none. Portal will handle it for you, but when it comes to the runtime, you're going to need to actually assign it. So I am using my Intel Gigabit network card to talk. You want to make sure that you scroll over to the right and make sure that it is one of the TCP IPs. So you'll notice I can either do auto or I can just do TCP IP. The first one in the list is ISO, and that would be we were trying to talk via MAC address. So we want to select TCP IP, and then this is where that S7 online comes into play. So you want to make sure that it says S7 online. If you wanted to make your own, we could add a new one and say S7 online 1 or S7 online 2. But it's easier to just delete the 1 or 2 in your project than it is to make a new one. So that's what it's going to be using. So we're going to say OK. And then I'm also going to close out of here. Oops, may have had 2 of these open. Oh, it's not liking that. So we'll hope that that stays. While that's gracefully shutting down, I'm going to come to my PLC and I'm going to make sure that I download it. So since we added the connection in our network, I just want to make sure that the PLC knows about that as well. So I'm going to just load that into the PLC. And then for testing purposes, to make sure that I have communications, I'm just going to start the runtime from my development. So if I look at the start screen, I should have this clock byte. I put in an exit runtime button just to get things going. Under the events, when you click on that button, it stops the runtime. And in real life, if this were going to be deployed at a system, I would probably have them stop the runtime and the operating system. I would have them actually shut down the computer. But for testing purposes right now, I'm just going to have them stop the WinCC advanced runtime. So that's what's happening there. And then I have an alarm view up at the top that's going to show me any sort of system warnings, anything like that. That's just so that when it connects, it tells me. Also, if it's having issues connecting, it will give me some indication as to what the problem might be. So at this point, we are ready to start runtime and test whether to see we have connections. So yay, you can see we've established the connection, and you can see that the clock byte is changing. So that went fairly well. We're going to exit the runtime. So I am just going to add one more tag to my project, and it's just a counter. So it's in a data block. So I'm just going to go to my HMI data block, float that for a second, and just drag it onto my screen. Not the most exciting screens, but useful. So at this point, let's say I'm ready to deploy and I'm ready to actually move it to the real computer that it's going to be running on. I want to make sure that I compile hardware and software and save the project, always a good idea. So on the Runtime computer, you will have, under Siemens Automation, Runtime Systems, Runtime Advanced. You're going to want to go to the Runtime Loader. That wasn't supposed to happen, so let me exit Runtime. Sorry, I already have the project in there, but you are going to just want to come into your settings. So it should, if you have no project installed, you should have your settings. We're going to go in there. And what you are looking for is this configuration path. So this is where it's going to be expecting your project. So typically, if this were on a different computer, I would share this folder. And then I can just do, share across the network from my development computer to this particular folder. But right now, I'm just going to take a copy. I'm just going to do Control-C. Then I'm going to go into Windows Explorer and paste that. Okay, so what you will see when you do that, or what you should see, is probably no project in there. So I'm just going to delete my particular project that happens to be there. So this is in program data. So if you look at the actual file, it's program data. Typically on most computers, program data will be a hidden folder. So that's why I had you copy it. If you copy it and paste it, it will bring you right there. If you're trying to browse for C program data, if your folders are hidden, you're likely not to see that. So in my case, my folder's unhidden, but default for most Windows systems is for program data not to be visible. So if you just copy it, keep that there. I'm then going to go open another Windows Explorer. And this time I'm going to be looking for where my project is. So in my case, it happens to be on the desktop. So I'm going to go to Desktop. And then it is this particular folder. So it's my project name is YT, Runtime Advanced to PLC. The HMI you're going to find under the IM. So if you double click on the IM, you'll find your HMI. And this number gets generated somehow in TI Portal. I haven't quite figured out where it gets this number, but it's there. And then there is a generates folder, and this is the folder that we care about. This is where all the runtime magic is. So I'm just going to copy everything that's in that folder, and then I'm going to bring it over to where that runtime is. So if you are working with an existing project, I don't have any recipes in this particular one, but recipes and passwords, this PWX file is the password file. So if you don't want to crunch all over the passwords that they may have already set up, don't copy this file over. But if you're just starting out and you want to put some passwords in there, make sure that you get all these folders. And then also your recipes as well. Kind of just be careful. The main one that I need you to get across is this FWC file. So at that point, we can go back to here and we can say to start, and that would start our project. And now you see I have both my clock byte and also just a counter that's counting up and counting down. So we have success.